it's 9 o'clock and I'd like to call this meeting to order. Portion of business is the Planning Council that was going ahead with. And I must first ask my fellow councillors if there's any declarations of pecuniary interest. I see no. Mr. Bolchak, Councillor Bolchak.
Yes, I have one. If I can grab the book. I just haven't got my agenda. Just tell us what it is.
Yeah.
I'm not sure of the number. Oh.
You need a copy of the agenda?
2019-02. 2019-02.
Okay. So Councillor Bolchak is declaring pecuniary interest on the 2019-02, one of the Shore Road allowance applications. Are there, is it not? What?
6A.
The report's 2019-02, not the bylaw.
Oh. Oh, it's a
6A.
development report versus clerk's report. My apologies. It was a bit confusing. Are there any, I guess confirming, no other declarations of pecuniary interest? Okay. Well, I'd like to, it's been moved for the adoption of the agenda. I'd like to end all those in favor. Thank you. One item that I will warn everybody of is at 10 o'clock we're going to take a very brief break to step outside for a flag raising. So you've been warned. 1 hour from now, when we all walk away, it'll only be temporarily. The first application in front of us is not subject to a public meeting, as it had a public meeting earlier. Development Service Report 2019-04 to Clos and to the planner, Mr. Robinson.
Morning, Your Worship and members of council. This application, and if there's any, I know some of the new members of council weren't here with respect to the public meeting that was held, so we don't typically do a presentation for the presentation of staff reports, but we do have some slides that show some pictures of the property, the survey. They're also included as appendices, so if there's any questions that relate to those when we get to those points, I'm happy to put those up on the screen. This is an application that deals with an undersized island. It is a small island, and what's being proposed is a second-story addition. So there's no proposed increase in footprint to the building, but it's essentially putting a second story on an existing cottage property on 12 Mile Bay. The property is currently zoned SRI1, and the proposal is to add a new site-specific zone that would facilitate that second story. And what I'll do is just review some of the sections of the zoning bylaw that require modification, and then provide a brief summary of the planning analysis that's contained in the report. And we'll also review some of the comments that were provided at the public meeting by council and how those have been addressed. So, with respect to the zoning bylaw, it does provide the ability through the non-complying section of the bylaw to allow for expansions to buildings that do not meet the requirements of the zoning bylaw. Currently, this existing structure on the property doesn't meet the zoning bylaw for one reason specifically, and that's because the front yard that exists is currently 3.26 meters. And that does not meet the required 20-meter setback that's in the zoning bylaw. Also, the lot itself is undersized in area. And then finally, the building is what the bylaw permits as of right, is it permits a 1 meter increase in height. Where you have a non-complying building, this building is proposed to be increased to a maximum height of 8 meters, which would facilitate the second story. In terms of lot area, the lot, as I mentioned, is undersized. It does have a lot area of about 1,420 square meters, and that's the lot area that's above the 177.4 contour. So the public meeting, as I mentioned, was conducted on October 9th, And at that public meeting, there were comments that were, there was no comments that were provided by any neighboring property owners. There were some comments that were provided by council. So I'd just like to summarize what those comments, generally the theme of those comments were, and then how those comments have been considered in the staff report. With respect to the comments, council wanted assurance from there was comments from council regarding assurance from adjacent landowners and the Lake Association that they have reviewed the proposal and have had no concerns. So the applicant, we did request the applicant to get in touch with neighboring landowners, and they have done that, and there's been no concerns or no comments with respect to the application from neighboring landowners. With respect to the associations in the area, they have been contacted, and there's been no comments provided with respect to the associations. The second comment was concerns that the increase in GFA and height on a small island might set a significant precedent for the amount of square footage on a small island, and how that might apply or be considered in other island circumstances. One of the interesting factors of this island that I think distinguishes it from many of the other islands that we see on the bay is the amount of vegetation on it and the amount of mature vegetation on it. If in viewing the images of the island, there is a significant amount of vegetation. There's a significant amount of mature vegetation, which doesn't often exist on some of the more outer islands or more windswept islands on the bay. And what it does is it screens the existing dwelling and also the second story that's being proposed from existing development that's to the south on the mainland. The existing cottage and the new second story of the cottage would be visible to the west if you're on 12 Mile Bay, but not visible from the cottages to the south. There's questions from council with respect to the status of the existing septic system on the lot and the installation of that septic system. So what exists on the lot is a traditional class 4 system. It was installed in 1983. So that was under the MOE approval at that time. That's my understanding. The setback for that existing septic system is identified on the site plan. It looks like it's about 10.3 meters to the bed on the from the high water mark. That is less than what's required by the current building code, which is 15 meters, and the zoning bylaw, which requires a 30-meter setback. However, it's an existing situation. And I would note that what's an important component of the proposed addition is that it's to add the second story, but no increase in bedrooms is proposed. Currently, there's 2 bedrooms. The system's designed for 2 bedrooms. The proposed addition and the proposed renovation would be to open up the main level of the cottage and then just have 2 bedrooms on the upper story, so no increase in bedrooms. So we did have, the building official did review the existing septic and what it's permitted in terms of fixtures and in terms of bedrooms, and the proposal would comply with the existing septic system. Any future permits, should this application be approved, that are considered by council, should this application be approved by council, any future building permit applications that are submitted would have to be capable of being serviced by the existing septic system that's in place. Finally, there was questions from council related to the water quality of 12 Mile Bay. 12 Mile Bay is considered a water body that has moderate sensitivity to phosphorus, and what that means is that there's different levels of classification for water quality and different considerations. What it means is that water body is capable of receiving additional phosphorus without essentially changing its status. That's sort of a big picture comment on the phosphorus component of it. And other than that, we're not aware of any other water quality concerns related to that 12 Mile Bay water body. So with that, we have reviewed the district official plan and the township official plan, and the proposed development does appear to conform with both documents with respect to being compatible, and it does have regard for the aesthetic quality of the waterfront, which are two of the key components of the township's official plan. So with that, staff have undertaken a comprehensive review of the proposal, have considered the comments from council, and provided responses to those comments. And the recommendation in this situation is that the proposed amendment to allow for a second story to be added, but no additional bedrooms, be approved by council, and that we recommend that council pass the accompanying zoning bylaw amendment that's attached to the document. I would just mention that one other item is that from a lot coverage perspective, the coverage isn't proposed to change as a result of the proposed development. There's no vegetation that's proposed to be removed, but the coverage does currently exceed the bylaw requirement, which is 7% for the SSRI 1 zone, currently sits at 10.8% coverage on the property. But again, no vegetation is proposed to be removed and no additional coverage added. So with that, completes the staff report, but again, the recommendation to council is to approve the proposed development by passing the accompanying zoning bylaw amendment. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Are there any councillors that would like to speak to this application? Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor Fitzgerald. It's just some questions for Jamie before I go into a lot of detail here. I see that you have put in this recommendation, the proposed application conforms to the Township of Georgian Bay official plan. And I'd like to understand how it does. I'm not sure I agree with that. I thought the official plan focuses on making sure that the built form in waterfront areas does not dominate the natural shoreline, but rather blend in. And so I'm having difficulty understanding how it is in compliance with the official plan. That's my first question.
I think one of the best ways to demonstrate that or show how that was considered is to refer to a couple of pictures of the property. I think the illustrations provide. So what we're considering here is the addition of a second story to this proposed dwelling. Maybe I'll just make it a little. And as you can, what this image shows is the existing cottage, and then the subsequent image is a rendering that shows a second story added to that cottage. So from a visual impact from the lake, and this is the view from the west that I spoke about, the view from 12 Mile Bay. In my opinion, that image and that addition of the second story from this view, which I would characterize as being the view with sort of the most impact associated with the proposed addition. In my opinion, it has a rather limited impact on the view. It's not unless you're very close to the island that you're gonna notice that impact. There is existing vegetation that helps buffer the cottage, even on that view from the west. And then we can see from this image that the south, which is on the bottom, and then on the north, which is on the top, there's a significant amount of vegetation on both sides of that island that buffer it. As I mentioned, it's not visible. The existing dwelling isn't visible from the south at all. So from my perspective, and based on my analysis, it's my opinion that there is an appropriate balance between built form and natural landscape with respect to this proposed development. So you may have a different opinion, but that's what I say.
So if I could just carry on, and I do. I do think this is significant, and frankly, the fact that things come to planning council scream to me that they may not fit in the official plan. That's my opinion. But just a few more questions. I'm looking at this in the township maps. I notice that there's another island that's about 5 times the size of this, that's just up the bay a bit, and it's natural state. It's right in this book here that we have that gives all the zonings and so forth, and this is designated SR1, I guess it is. And I'm really quite perplexed as to why it hasn't been zoned SR exception 51. As so many of these this is about a third of an acre as I understand, a third of an acre island. Many islands within the Township of Georgian Bay are in fact designated exception 51. So it looks to me like the zoning was incorrectly done and it was an oversight at the time. But nevertheless, it is what it is. And I'd like, Jamie, if you could just explain to me, is that an incorrect assumption that there are many islands that are the size or slightly larger, under an acre, let's say, that are zoned with exception 51? And if they are, I thought exception 51 says you've got what you've got, but you don't get anything more. Could you answer that for me, please? Thank you.
Through your worship, I'm not going to comment on whether or not this island should or should not have been zoned SRI 51 and what the relationship of other islands are. I don't think it's relevant to this situation. What I would comment on is the purpose of the SRI 51 zone is to limit, you're correct in stating that it's to limit development opportunities on a lot to what you've got right now. What essentially it precipitates is that any proposed change would require a zoning bylaw amendment. Doesn't mean that it's not possible. It means it's got to go through a zoning bylaw amendment process. Consultation has to occur, and there's a decision before council. And given this island, and given its small size, and given the limited amount of setbacks that exist currently, any future development on this island is effectively in the same state. They require a zoning bylaw amendment to come to council because all of the existing situations are non-complying. So regardless of whether this island's on SRI 1 or SRI 51, the result of any future development is the same. In order to consider future development, a zoning bylaw amendment is required. So, and it's a decision of council to consider. The Planning Act permits applications to be made for any type of zoning. It just means that there is a decision that has to be made and there's a public process that has to go through for these small islands.
I'm still going through my questions, if that's all right.
No other councillors objected so far, so but I'm sure there's a few others that may want to speak.
Well, I'm sure they do, and I'd be more than happy to give them an opportunity, but I still have a few more questions. So this septic system is 1983, so it's 35 years old. And while it says this application is saying that there are no more bedrooms, in fact, we've got an upper floor that's going to be all bedrooms of two, each one being probably 450 or over square feet each, which is a pretty large bedroom. I really find it hard to believe that there aren't going to be more people residing here, and that is concerning to me. Where it's intensification, significant intensification, double the size of the square footage, so that concerns me. And I'm concerned about the view from the canoe, even if it's only on the west side. I'm still concerned, and the precedent that we're setting. So for a variety of different reasons, I am quite concerned, and I really do not feel I can support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Anyway, Councillor Jarvis, followed by Councillor Wyanko.
Your Honor, just curious to know, I see we have the assurance from adjacent landowners that and the Lake Association, that they have reviewed the proposal. Do we have any documentation to that effect?
Through your worship, I don't have any documentation other than the correspondence that we had with the owner, but no, nothing in writing, either for or against the proposal. So.
Your Honor, we had an arm at the back of the room. I don't know if that helps or not.
I have 3 emails from the most affected landowners saying they don't object.
This is not a public meeting, but appreciate the input.
I wasn't given the opportunity to give the Jamie
Okay.
or Councillor Roberts.
Appreciate the additional information. Thank you.
One other question. The other thing was, according to your notes, a 25% increase in the floor space is allowed under the current zoning?
Through your worship, yes, that's correct.
Yeah, my concerns again are mirror Peter's, and I'd be happy with a 25% increase. I'm not too sure about something that significantly bigger on such a small piece of property. Thank you.
Councillor Bianca.
Was there a site visit to this property of any staff members?
Through your worship, former staff members there haven't been from current staff members. Given the time of year, we weren't able to get out there.
Okay, because it looks like to me like this is, the existing cottage looks a bit rustic to me. Maybe it isn't, but it looks like it from these photographs. And I'm just wondering, if you're going to put a second story on it, you may have to rebuild the whole place. Is that an issue? Like, obviously you're going to have to reinforce the walls, and if you're going to start doing that, you've got to start rebuilding the whole place from pretty well foundation up. Can I get a comment on that at all?
Through your worship, that'll be determined if we get the building permit. At the time, there's always construction difficulties that they could encounter. There could be beam replacement and everything, but that would still regulate to what the original plan was. They wouldn't be able to exceed any of the parameters of what they applied for the living space, fixture units, and bedrooms. That's what they would have to build for. Once they started the construction, if they found termite damage or whatever, yes, it would have to be addressed.
Yeah. So that doesn't change the issue when you build from ground up. Then you can still pretty well tear this place down and rebuild it.
If they get a permit and approval in place, yes.
Because I imagine if you're going to open up the downstairs, you're going to have to put some fairly big beams in to open that up. Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you, Mayor. A question with regards to when the photos were taken. Are they just recent ones? I'm just thinking about water levels.
Through your worship, I believe they were taken last summer by staff and by Mr. Declos.
Councillor Cooper.
Just, for instance, this photograph here, if you look at that and then you look at Google Earth, this looks like it's not high water to me, just to answer that concern. And while I am interested to hear that some of the residents in the area are not concerned about this and support it, I think in the scheme of things, while that's very nice, I'm not convinced that's a significant planning issue when you look at all the other factors that are not mitigating. So I just wanted to point that out, that I noticed that the opinion of the neighbors was the first item on the list of supporting arguments, and I'm not convinced that's exactly what we need to be thinking about. Thank you.
Are there any other councillors that wish to speak to this matter, or should I call for the vote? I will call for the vote.
Sorry,
Oh.
your worship. If it looks like it's going to be a denial, I'd recommend that you consider deferral of the application. Given the new LPAT regime, it would be important that if there's going to be a denial, that council consider their options and make sure they're in the best position going forward to the LPAT, and that would likely require retaining another professional planner to provide you support for a denial decision. So I just think you might want to keep that in mind in making your decision.
Thank you. Councillor Wyanko.
Well, I have no problem with this. It's not really increasing the footprint on the island, and we're just going straight up. So I think that's not a bad option. I think he could have come back and said he wanted to add on to the back and et cetera, which I probably wouldn't have supported. But when you're going straight up, and you look at it within the tree line and so on, so it's not above the trees. So I have no problem with this particular application.
Councillor Cooper.
I'm not sure which way this is going to go, but I think the advice from our planner might be worthy of considering, and that is a deferral. I'd support that, and see if there's some way that this could come back to us in such a way that we might be more agreeable to it. But the age of the septic bed, the amount of intensification here is concerning to me, and so I'm going to suggest that we give that consideration as a deferral. Thank you.
Councillor Jarvis.
I'm thinking along the same lines as Councillor Cooper on this. If we could get somebody out to have a look at this place before we made any decisions, it would be very helpful, I suspect.
Councillor Hazelton.
Can I ask, Jamie, can I ask what alternate ideas the applicant has come up with that wouldn't conflict with some of the concerns that Peter has raised, Councillor Cooper? In other words, it's 100% almost across the board increase, and it's hard to believe that you're going to have two 450 square foot bedrooms and not dramatically increase the density of use of the property. So if you have a septic system that only supports 2 bedrooms and it's a 35-year-old septic system, and I'm now rebuilding the property, so I have 2 bedrooms that are capable of probably handling, 8 people each. Who knows what they do after you get the building permit and finish it off. It doesn't sound like, something doesn't sound right here. And I'm very concerned that the precedent setting on a tiny, tiny island in Georgian Bay, when you and Mr. Councillor Cooper and I spent some significant time going through all kinds of other islands where they are probably improperly zoned, that we would be wanting to provide consistency across the bay, and this doesn't appear to me to be kind of a consistent strategy for handling really small, undersized islands. So I guess the question is, have those concerns been shared with the applicant, and has the applicant responded to those concerns?
Through your worship, I'm not sure I can specifically answer that question. What I can say is that the applicant is aware that this application had the potential to be contentious. They are aware that it is an undersized island. They are aware that they are more than doubling, that they are aware that the current building is non-conforming. They are aware that they're doubling the size of gross floor area, so they're aware of those considerations. They selected to make an application and carry forward with an application based on that understanding. They do have a professional planner that's been retained to represent them and prepare the application. So I think they're well educated with respect to the process and the policies, and they made the decision to come forward. And we've, as staff, have reviewed the application before it based on its merits and based on our review of the policies in play. So I think what the big picture on what you're speaking about is, are they educated and have they considered any reductions or any lesser development? And I think that was probably all the factor, but I can't say for certain. But those are all the comments I can really provide with respect to that.
Any other councillor wish to speak to this matter at this point? I have one question that I'm not sure I heard the answer to, and then and a couple of comments before I call the vote. The question is, with regards to the septic system, and Mr. Fedori, this question will be for you. Will you be inspecting it to make sure it can perform to the standard it was originally designed to perform as part of the building permit?
We'll do a review on the plans that are submitted, and the use permit that was approved on August 5th, 1983. It says that's what that property can sustain is 2,150 square feet, 2 bedrooms, 20 fixture units. We don't go out and look at the bed and determine if it's okay. The only way that you could physically possibly do that would you have the pipes exposed and everything else. You can't see if there's root mass growing in there or if the biomass underneath. It would have to require a new bed for something like that to be looked at.
Thank you. I'm sensing from my fellow councillors that there's probably at least 3 councillors who are not prepared to approve this. And I don't know whether there's some willingness perhaps to defer, and given that we have the option of approval, defeat, or defer, I'm going to put it to all of you if deferral is your preference versus just calling a straight approve or defeat.
I support a deferral.
I support the deferral.
Okay, so I'm now going to call the vote. All those in favor of deferring this particular application? Okay, and I'll throw my vote in. Sorry, CEO Kennard.
Wrap up your vote,
Okay.
and then I just have a question on staff direction.
Okay. This is now deferred. There's 4 of us voting for deferral. Thank you.
Your Worship, I just had a question on staff direction out of that deferral. Are you deferring it for me to get a different planning opinion, or are you deferring it for Jamie to work with the applicant on something that perhaps you find more acceptable? That's 2 separate things, so I just need to know what direction you'd like me to go in.
Councilor Cooper, you wish to speak to that question?
Yeah, I think just having another opinion how this is terrific isn't necessarily what we might be looking for here. At least I would be looking for something where it's more compliant, and that would be my suggestion to the applicant, so that we are not looking at this level of intensification. Thank you.
Councilor Jarvis?
Same deal here. If we can get somebody else's opinion. Where I cottage, we have a number of small islands, and it is a significant issue to have expansion on buildings like this. While the photo does show some things that look pretty well hidden, I don't know if that's going to be ongoing after the building has been completed. I have same concerns as both Councillor Cooper and Councillor Hazelton with regards to the actual end use of the property after the addition has gone on. So I would think that another opinion would be most welcome. Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Hazelton.
Back to the actual
Sorry.
answer.
Okay. No, I think this is our vehicle. Yeah. No. Okay, fine. CEO Kennard.
Sorry, I'm not 100% sure on what the consensus was on council direction. Are you looking for Jamie to work with the applicant to perhaps find alternatives to their application, or are you looking for me to get a second planning opinion? Any concurrence in direction there?
I think we are looking for Jamie to work with the applicant. I mean, as Jamie himself acknowledged, the applicant is fully conscious that this application was, and if I may be allowed to use these words, a stretch, and that the deferral will give them an opportunity to reconsider what they want.
Okay.
I think it might be premature to get a second opinion at this moment.
Needed to be clear, because I was hearing some different things.
Are the rest of the council in agreement with that for now?
We'll take that as staff direction. Thank you.
I don't think a second opinion will
Yeah.
change anything. I think some of the council here is going to deny it if it comes down to this issue. You know, it has to change in order to have an opportunity.
Okay, thank you very much. Next on our agenda is a public meeting held under the authority of the Municipal Act. This morning there are 3 public meetings scheduled for Shore Road closing applications. I will briefly summarize the procedure to be utilized for the meetings. First, the clerk will advise council as to when, how, and to whom the notice of the public meeting was circulated. Next, the deputy clerk will advise of the purpose and effect of the bylaw and provide for any other information that is relevant to the application. From there, the applicant and members of the public will have an opportunity to speak to the bylaw being considered. Council will then consider the bylaw immediately following. I now declare this meeting to be a public meeting pursuant to the Municipal Act SO 2001 C25 as amended to deal with the following proposed road closing bylaw. 2019-05, Cook and Robbins, 2019-06, Candido, and 2019-08, 2294029, Ontario Limited.
Notice of the public meeting was published in newspaper, and notice was sent to the abutting neighbors in the close proximity of the properties at least 20 days prior to today's meeting.
And to the planning staff for the reports, please.
Okay, good morning. This first application is it's a group application for 59 and 61 Ellery Road. The purpose of the application is that the applicants wish to own the land, and the area to be sold is 2,481.24 square meters at a rate of $8 per square meter for a purchase price of $19,849.92 plus HST. Staff have no concerns with this application, and no comments were received from the public with respect to these applications.
Is there anybody from the public who wishes to speak to this matter? Seeing no response, I will ask if any of my fellow councillors wish to speak to this. Councillor Cooper.
Could you go back to the previous slide, please? Just I need some clarification. I'm sorry, one more, the one that's just the overview of that baby. The black is the area that's owned by the applicant, is that correct?
That's correct.
And so I understand the shore road allowance up to the edge of their border on the lower side. I'm not quite understanding why the white is showing in front of two other lots. Is that just notional, or they're not buying that area, are they?
So through your worship, I'm just going to move to the next, to the final slide here. So you'll see that it's a bit of a peninsula, and part 2 on the, that's attached to part 1 is the land that they're purchasing. So it comes all the way out to the point.
I get that part, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Could you, could you go back to that other one? I'll point it out. So what I'm talking about is, they're not buying this.
Oh, through your worship, that's correct. They're not buying that.
This just happens to be shore road allowance, but it, it's confusing. So the line is here, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Jarvis.
Your Honor, curious to know if the overhead picture looks like it's taken in low water. Is that correct?
Through your worship, this image was taken quite a few years ago, so I'm not sure. I can't remember the date. I think 2013.
2013. Are councillors ready to vote on this motion?
Mayor?
Oh, sorry, Councillor Cooper.
Just on the point about the low water and so forth, just to explain to all of us, they're buying shore road allowance above the high water mark, or just whatever we happen to see? Could you explain that to the council, please?
Through your worship, our shore road allowance policy states that we do not sell flooded land. So as it shows in this image, which was taken, this is the survey that was taken last year. Any land that's flooded would not be included in this. So you'll see that just part 2 is what they're purchasing, even though the land, when it's not flooded, may be larger than that. So does that answer your question?
Not really. Does the survey, does it show the high water mark?
It does.
Where is it?
Or the water's, it shows the water's edge.
So it's, sorry, just to be clear then, this is the high water mark, this line here?
Correct.
So they're buying, the short road allowance that they're paying for is above the high water mark?
Correct.
Thank you. Sorry for all the 20 questions.
No. Are councillors ready for me to read the motion? Be it resolved that council pass bylaw 2019-05, being a bylaw to stop up and close the shore road allowance in front of 59 and 61 Ellery Road. All those in favor?
I have a question of clarity.
Yes, please.
The dwelling that is on the property, it looks like the front deck is encroaching on this shore road allowance. Is that the purchase, is that the reason for the purchase of the shore road allowance?
Through your worship, it's just they're wanting ownership of the land. That wasn't the reason for purchasing it, that it's encroaching. But it is bonus that it's making it legal, their structure as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. On to the next one, please. Oh, did we not vote? I thought I saw everybody's hands. Okay, let's confirm. Are all those in favor of the prior? Thank you. Now we have it confirmed.
Okay, this next application is for 2851 Honey Harbor Road. It is, the applicants are selling the property, and that's the purpose for their application. The total area to be sold is 1,655 square meters at a rate of $8 per square meter for a purchase price of $13,240 plus HST. Staff have no concerns with this application, and there were no comments received from the public.
Is there anybody in the public here who wishes to speak to this application? No response. Do any councillors wish to speak to this? Councillor Wayanko.
So this is a commercial property?
Through your worship, that's correct.
So it's a marina? It looks like a bunch of cabins on the shore road allowance. Those are all cabins, I assume, they're rentals?
Through your worship, I don't know what it's technically classified as, but those are just cabins. Don't believe it's a marina.
Does anybody from Georgian Bay know what this area is?
I can tell you that it is not part of the marina that you see just to the north of it. It's a separate property.
So this is not a marina, this is private land.
So, you know where Village Marina is?
Yep.
And you go around the corner and then you've got Honey Harbor Small Motors?
Yep.
Between those two properties, you have a bunch of cabins.
Right.
That's what this
Okay,
property
yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Is this small?
No,
No.
no, it's between Honey Harbor Small Motors, going, going clockwise around to Village Marine.
So that's theirs.
On that little point there where those cabins are that are falling down. Oh, sorry.
Could you bring up the overhead view there? If you look at the bottom left corner, that's Village Marine,
Thank you.
and the dock above, and the top of the picture is Honey Harbor Small Motors.
Oh, the dock, so this is not the dock, the one we see up above is not part of this parcel of land, that's
No.
Small Motors, okay.
Yes.
Oh, so all those docks,
Councillor
so
Wayanko.
all those boats aren't part of this property?
Correct.
So the line draw, okay, that's a marina, okay. So, but the next picture, there's a dock in there, that doesn't show up in any overhead. Big long dock.
It's disassembled at the bottom there. So you'll see these structures down at the bottom are the dock.
Oh, okay, then take it into the window.
Councillor Jarvis.
I'm curious, that means all these cabins that are on the property, I go by it every weekend, are all on shore road allowance, is that correct?
Correct. That's correct.
Would that have been allowed?
Back in the day, yes.
Well, west.
Does any other councillor wish to speak to this, or should I read the motion? Be it resolved that council pass bylaws 2019-06 and 2019-07, being a bylaw to stop up and close the shore road allowance in front of 2851 Honey Harbor Road, and a bylaw to deem the property no longer on a plan of subdivision. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. I think we can do one more before we disappear for flag raising.
This last application is for 61237 River Shore. The total area to be sold is 1,130 square meters at a rate of $8 per square meter for a purchase price of $9,040 plus HST. The owners wish to own the shore road allowance for future development purposes as it's vacant land. And staff have no concerns with this application, and there were no comments received from the public.
Do any members of the public, sorry,
Do any members of the public here wish to speak to this application? Seeing no response, do any councillors wish to speak to this application? Councillor Jarvis.
Point of clarification, Your Honor. Again, if we go back to the first shot that you showed us, it's just the property lines from that parcel of land extended out to the lake that is being sold, correct?
Through your worship, it's straight extension of the existing lot lines, you're correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Wyanko.
So this is a vacant lot,
That's correct.
and that's where he wants to build?
Correct.
Yeah. And there's no fish habitat in this area? Looks like a little bit of a bay back in this, to the left, it seems to be a little bit of a bay back in there. There's no fish habitat back in there?
Through your worship, I requested that information from the planning department, and they did not state there was.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Councillor Cooper.
So did you, I was focusing on something here, sorry. Did you say it is fish habitat or not, or you don't know?
There is no fish habitat here.
Councillor Wyanko.
If this is water in here, which is shows in the picture, why wouldn't that land go around here? Why is it going across the water?
That's the buildable area. That's not the water all the way down at the bottom.
But they're purchasing this, which would be water.
Through your worship, they're not purchasing that. They're only purchasing part 7, which starts here.
Okay, so those lines,
They show the original shore road allowance, which may not have been flooded when they did the...
okay, so they're purchasing water here.
Through your worship, they're only purchasing part 7.
Again, if I may, so they already own what is labeled as Part 8 on that drawing?
That is correct.
Okay.
Okay, but it's playing with part 7 in the yard.
What's the divide line between part 7 and part 8?
Solve the puzzle.
This is the original shore road allowance in here.
Yeah.
They're purchasing what's not flooded, so that means part 7. Yeah, all of this is flooded. And when they did the original survey, part 8 and part 6, I'm not sure why this was established like this, but that's what they did.
So for confirmation, we cannot sell a shore road allowance to an applicant if it is currently flooded.
That is correct.
Councillor Cooper.
And this may have been said also, but just for clarification, I see where it is, but it's governed also by the Trent Severn rules, shall we say, is that correct?
So, I'm not sure.
Because they're pretty restrictive, as I understand it, so I just wanted to make sure that
For purchasing purposes,
no,
this,
for planning,
but planning that,
waterfront purposes, I guess, is that correct, Jamie? Am I-
That is correct. It's subject to the Trent Severn policies.
Thank you, I just wanted to,
Of course, at this point, we're just approving the shore road allowance. Then they will have those challenges come if they want to do some building,
I
yes.
understand that, I just wanted to make sure I understood.
Any other questions from my fellow councillors? Councillor Jarvis.
Sorry, the plans here show there is a dwelling, correct?
No, that's proposed.
Well, it's proposed dwelling?
that's
Thank
correct.
you.
Okay, I'm going to read the motion. Be it resolved that council pass bylaw 2019-08, being a bylaw to stop up and close the shore road allowance in front of 6123 Severn River Shore. All those in favor? Carried. It is now 10 to 10, and I know that at 10 o'clock, by 10 o'clock we are to be outside, and I'm going to suggest then that we might now take a bio break instead of jumping into the next case, which will get interrupted. So we're temporarily recess. So we're in recess for approximately 15 minutes. amendment application.
Good morning. Our next application is ZBL 18-33 for Andrew and Brittany Gendron regarding lands located at 12 Moore Point Road. So as you can see here, the parcel is outlined here in black. So here we have an aerial of the property. So the lands are currently designated rural in the Township Official Plan and zoned residential type 1, R1 in the zoning bylaw. Existing structures on the property include a single detached dwelling and a shed. So the purpose of this application is to rezone the subject lands from the residential R1 zone to a site-specific rural exception 7 zone. The site-specific zone would recognize a minimum lot frontage of 0 meters on a public road and a minimum lot area of 4 hectares. So the effect of this amendment would be to permit the future redevelopment of the property with a new single detached dwelling in a location further set back from the traveled right-of-way. So here we have the excerpt from the zoning map. So again, the lands are designated rural in the official plan. And in the official plan, it states that rural land uses are those lands that are located outside of settlement areas, outside of waterfront communities, and also outside of the waterfront designation. So essentially, the rest of the lands within the township typically are designated rural. So again, through this amendment, the lands would be rezoned into that rural zone, which is more suited given the location, of course, outside of the settlement area and away from any water access, which would bring the property into conformity with the official plan. So here we have some photos. So this is the existing subject property with the dwelling here in the back, and this is taken from the driveway entrance off the traveled road of Moore Point Road. And so here from the driveway access, looking west, I believe, yep, down Moore Point Road. And here looking east, or sorry, west. The previous one was east, my apologies. And a more detailed view of the existing dwelling on the subject lands and the existing shed that also does exist. And here's the approximate location of the septic area. Apologize for the snow. And here we are looking from the existing dwelling towards Moore Point Road, and again, the driveway location here. Here's the west side of the dwelling, just showing the, essentially the rest of the property is very heavily forested. And here's a shot of the west, approximate location of the west and north unopened road allowances that do exist. I'll show you on the survey in the coming slides of where I mean. And here is that unopened east road allowance that does exist. So this is the survey that was used when the lot was originally created. As you can see here, this is what I was referring to as those unopened road allowances that do flank the property to the north and to the south. And so this survey was created by the for the applicant by a more recent surveyor that does show the existing dwelling location, and it does show how Moore Point Road actually, the traveled road does not lay within those unopened road allowances. Therefore, by definition of our bylaw, this lot does not have any legal frontage. So to summarize the application, the existing structures on the property are considered legal non-complying structures. Within our current bylaw, the property has no legal frontage. Due to this, the owner would only be permitted to rebuild the dwelling like for like in its exact location. However, it is their intention to relocate the property further back from the traveled right-of-way. So in order for them to get a building permit for this new dwelling that they propose to build in the future, this amendment is required to recognize that lack of frontage on a public road, as well as the minimum lot area of 4 hectares. So the new dwelling will continue to use the same entrance that is shown here, so no change in entrance to the property is anticipated, nor would it be permitted. There will not be any change to access to the property. The amendment would also be an opportunity to align the zoning of the property, which I spoke to before, with the actual official plan designation. So again, no new parcel of land is being created through this application, nor the existing use of the property is being altered. So currently there is one single detached dwelling, and per this application, in the future, there will still be only one single detached dwelling on the property. This would maintain the very low density of the area, which we're all familiar with, and it is anticipated that the new dwelling would not be visible from either Moore Point Road, the traveled right-of-way, or to any neighbors. And for those reasons, staff is in support of council passing the bylaw. And also the applicant is here if you have any additional questions for them or myself.
The District of Muskoka submitted a letter and they have no concerns with the application.
Thank you, thank you. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak to this application? Seeing none, I will ask if any members of council wish to speak to it. And Councillor Wyanko, saw your hand first.
Thanks. I have no problem with this application, but I think they are trespassing, I guess, across our property, get to their property. Could we put a requirement in that they purchase some section there that would abut on Moore Point so they have clear title to their entrance?
So through your worship, there is an existing entrance permit that was issued from the township to allow this driveway to exist. And to my knowledge, that entrance permit is still maintained as functional, I guess you could say. It is not anticipated, because they are going to be using the exact same entrance, there is no reason that the township should assume, or at least it's staff's opinion, that no purchase would be necessary of that.
We got a whole lineup here. Like Councillor Bochek, Councillor Cooper, followed by Councillor Hazelton is how I really
So I'm quite familiar with this property and know the family, and I've been there to do a site visit. And it would be hypocritical of me to say anything negative to this, as I have a 27-foot frontage on Honey Harbor Road, which it allows me access to my 3-acre property. So I understand exactly what you're talking about, and I would support this application.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, once again, I just want a clarification with respect to the current, I think you said this, but the current dwelling will be torn down, and it'll have to be, I guess, because you're allowing access through the same road to a new dwelling that's further into the property. Is that correct?
Through your worship, that is correct. There would only be one dwelling permitted pre and post this amendment, yes. So no second dwelling.
And I'm just for curiosity, why wouldn't the owner want to buy some of their road allowance to, sort of protect their border rights, as it were? Is there just no interest? Is that it?
Through your worship, it was intended that ideally, just from a financial standpoint as well, coming into trying to redevelop the lands to make it more feasible for their family, et cetera, that because there is an existing access for them to be able to use that for now, if they may have plans in the future to do so, I can't speak to that. You could ask the applicant, though, if you wish to.
Just curious. And finally, this is a back lot, essentially. Do we allow back lots in our township?
Through your worship, it's technically a rural lot. Back lots, hard to explain, but we do have our own zoning for back lots, and this is not zoned for back lot. The definition of that I can read out if you wish.
So
but
that's fine. So it doesn't qualify as a back lot?
No, it does not.
But there are areas that we allow them, I understand, in urban areas, I suppose. But in rural areas, some rural areas in our township, we don't allow back lot. Is that correct?
Through your worship, I believe that's correct, but the director may be able to confirm that.
Through your worship, we do allow back lots in the waterfront designation, so provided they meet certain standards, which is an increased lot frontage.
In all waterfront
Yes.
locations, we allow back lots?
Yes, on a public road.
Oh, interesting.
There's very few back lots on public roads.
Not on public roads.
Yeah, township owned roads.
Oh, okay, but we don't allow back lots just where there are no roads or private roads.
That's correct, on a private road or a... Yeah.
Thank you.
And yes, I don't want to watch us drift too far away from this particular application. Councillor Hazelton.
I like something that is clean, and the idea of a permit to cross over township land to access his land is, to me, doesn't sound clean. What would it cost to sell that small section of not shore road, but road allowance, what would it cost to just carve out that piece of road allowance and sell it to the applicant to make it all clean?
Through your worship, I would have to confirm the square meters of that area. I don't know offhand this small portion how large that would be. I do believe it's $6 or $8 a square meter. Again, that's something that the clerk may be able to confirm because that's not in my daily privy.
It is $6 a square meter for road allowance, plus the application fee is $1,150, and then there's a legal fee of possibly at least $500, I know of. They could also apply for a license of occupation, which they would renew annually for $100.
And how does that differ, sorry, continuing, how does that differ from this, a license of application versus this road access or driveway access?
License of occupation gives them exclusive use of the specified lands, and this entrance permit just allowed them to enter their property off of our land.
So a license of use is only $100 a month, or is there other costs?
The license of occupation, it's $200 to apply and $100 every month, or every year, sorry, to renew it.
Isn't that cleaner than what currently exists?
I think it was staff's opinion that it's fine the way it is, but if council would like that condition be put on, we can do that.
Just a personal opinion, if it was my property, I'd want more controls over that access point and this idea of exclusive access. If you can get that for the kind of dollars we're talking, it sounds to me like it would be a preferred approach, both ways.
Councillor Wojcik.
Yeah, I'm going to frankly disagree with Councillor Hazelton on this one, just to the fact that a lot of roads, a lot of driveways off of municipal roads are exactly as this is. There is access granted. The township itself on municipal roads owns from the center line in probably about the amount that would be able to be purchased there anyway, so he'd just be purchasing something that the township still has the rights to. So this is commonplace in this township to have an entrance off a municipal road which isn't owned. A license of occupancy, $100 a year, might not be a bad idea, then you have full rights to it. But that's something that the applicant has to decide. He hasn't expressed a will or a want to do that in this application.
Does any other councillor wish to speak to this matter? Councillor Jarvis.
I'm just curious, there's a permit to use that entrance. Is there an annual cost? What's the cost of the permit?
Through your worship, I do not know that answer. The director may.
It's not an annual fee, it's a one-time application for a driveway entrance, and then you're granted it forever. So no annual fee for an entrance permit.
Appreciate it. So it's granted forever? Okay. That's pretty clean by itself, but I'd agree with both councils over there. If I might be in the homeowner's best interest to make another arrangement that just seems a little more definite, that's all.
Well, I'm sure the homeowner appreciates the advice. That's not the matter that's in front of us, and unless we want to put a condition on it, the choices that we face are either we can choose to approve the zoning bylaw today, or we can ask staff to come back in response to some of our questions, though I don't think, other than access, there have been very many questions. So I'm going to read the motion which would imply approval today. Be it resolved that council adopts bylaw number 2019-02, being a zoning bylaw amendment, zoning bylaw 18/33-12 Moore Point Road. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Oh, you're going to stroke? All right, that was the last item on our in our planning council agenda. So our next couple of motions, gentlemen, are, make sure, be it resolved that council adopts bylaw 2019-03, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the January 14th, 2019 planning council meeting. All those in favor? Carried, thank you. And then, finally, be it resolved that Planning Council does now adjourn at 11:10 a.m. until Monday, February 11th, 2019 at 9 o'clock, 9 a.m., or at the call of the chair. All those in favor? Carried, thank you. The Planning Council portion is now concluded.